across the vast Great Plains of North America, where the sky stretches endlessly in every direction. A phenomenon occurs that has terrified and fascinated humans for millennia. Massive columns of rotating air descend from storm clouds, carving paths of destruction across the landscape with winds exceeding 300 miles per hour. These tornadoes, nature's most violent storms, can level entire communities in mere minutes, leaving devastation in their wake that modern technology still struggles to predict and survive. Yet long before Doppler radar, storm shelters, and early warning systems existed, indigenous peoples lived in harmony with these same deadly forces of nature for thousands of years. The question that haunts historians and meteorologists alike is profound. How did Native American tribes not only survive in tornado-prone regions, but thrive there for generations? What ancient wisdom allowed them to coexist with storms that modern civilization approaches with fear and trepidation? The answer lies buried in oral traditions, archaeological evidence, and a sophisticated understanding of nature that Western science is only beginning to appreciate. Native American communities developed intricate systems of tornado prediction, survival strategies, and spiritual practices that turned these destructive forces from enemies into teachers. Their methods were so effective that entire tribes could disappear into the landscape when tornadoes approached, emerging unharmed after the storms passed. This story unfolds across centuries of accumulated wisdom, where careful observation of animal behavior, cloud formations, and atmospheric pressure became matters of life and death. These weren't primitive peoples cowering in fear of natural disasters, but sophisticated societies that had decoded the language of the sky itself. They understood patterns in nature that meteorologists today confirm with advanced computer models and satellite imagery. Through 3 remarkable chapters of survival, adaptation, and spiritual understanding, we'll uncover how Native Americans transformed their relationship with tornadoes from victims to survivors, and ultimately to people who could read the very breath of the storm gods themselves. Their techniques weren't just about physical survival, but about maintaining cultural continuity in the face of nature's most unpredictable fury. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prairie as tribal elders gathered their communities around sacred fires, sharing knowledge that had been passed down through countless generations. These weren't casual conversations about weather, but intensive training sessions where the difference between life and death lay in understanding the subtle signs that preceded nature's most violent outbursts. Native American tribes across the Great Plains had developed an intricate system of atmospheric observation that modern meteorology would later validate with scientific instruments. Tribal weather readers, respected members of their communities, spent decades learning to interpret the complex dance of air masses, cloud formations, and barometric pressure changes that announced the arrival of severe storms. The Lakota people called them thunder beings, while the Cherokee referred to them as wind spirits. But regardless of the name, every Plains tribe recognized the specific atmospheric signatures that preceded tornado formation. They observed how certain cloud formations developed distinctive mammatus appearances, resembling hanging pouches that indicated severe instability in the upper atmosphere. They noticed how the air itself seemed to become electric, causing hair to stand on end and creating an oppressive stillness that made even the bravest warriors uneasy. Animal behavior became their earliest warning system, more reliable than any modern radar. Prairie dogs would disappear into their burrows hours before storms arrived. Birds would flee in specific directions, creating migration patterns that experienced observers could read like maps. Horses and buffalo would become agitated, gathering in tight groups and facing away from approaching danger. Even insects provided crucial intelligence, with dragonflies swarming in unusual patterns that indicated rapid pressure changes in the atmosphere. The timing of these observations was critical. Native Americans understood that tornadoes followed seasonal patterns, typically appearing during late spring and early summer when cold, dry air masses collided with warm, moist air rising from the south. They tracked these patterns across years and decades, creating mental maps of when and where tornadoes were most likely to strike their territories. But perhaps most remarkably, they developed the ability to predict the specific paths that tornadoes would follow. By understanding how terrain features influenced wind patterns, tribal forecasters could anticipate where storms would intensify and where they would weaken. They knew that tornadoes typically avoided crossing rivers, often dissipated when climbing steep hills, and tended to follow certain geographical corridors that channeled the wind flow. This knowledge wasn't theoretical, it was immediately practical. When the signs aligned, indicating that severe weather approached, the entire social structure of Native American communities shifted into emergency protocols that had been refined through centuries of experience. When the atmospheric signals reached critical thresholds, Native American communities executed one of the most sophisticated emergency response systems ever developed by any civilization. Within hours of recognizing tornado indicators, entire villages could vanish from the landscape, leaving behind only empty spaces where hundreds of people had lived and worked just moments before. The key to this remarkable disappearing act lay in the portable nature of Native American architecture and their profound understanding of terrain features that provided natural tornado protection. Unlike permanent structures that stood vulnerable against the wind, tipis and similar dwellings could be dismantled and moved with extraordinary speed. Experienced families could collapse and pack their homes in less than 30 minutes, loading everything onto horses or travois for immediate relocation. But movement wasn't random or panicked. Every tribe maintained detailed knowledge of storm shelters throughout their territory, natural formations that provided protection from tornado winds. These weren't caves or underground bunkers, but carefully selected geographical features, where the physics of wind flow created zones of relative calm even during the most violent storms. Creek beds and ravines became primary shelter locations, especially those with overhanging banks or rock formations that could deflect wind flow. The tribes understood that tornadoes typically stayed above ground level, making low-lying areas much safer than exposed elevated positions. They also recognized that certain hill configurations created wind shadows, areas where the circular motion of tornado winds actually protected rather than threatened anyone positioned correctly within them. River valleys offered another layer of protection, as the moisture and cooler air near water sources tended to disrupt the energy patterns that sustained tornado formation. Many tribes would move their entire communities to predetermined positions along riverbanks when severe weather threatened, knowing that the natural air circulation patterns near flowing water would provide additional safety margins. The logistics of these mass evacuations required extraordinary social coordination. Specialized roles emerged within tribal structures, with specific individuals responsible for different aspects of storm response. Some members became expert in rapid livestock management, able to gather and move horses, cattle, and other animals to safe locations with minimal confusion or delay. Others specialized in protecting valuable resources, ensuring that food, supplies, tools, weapons, and sacred objects could be preserved even during emergency relocations. Communication systems allowed these movements to be coordinated across vast distances. Signal fires, smoke patterns, and runner networks could spread tornado warnings throughout entire tribal territories within hours, enabling multiple communities to respond simultaneously to approaching threats. These networks were so efficient that neighboring tribes often shared storm intelligence, creating regional early warning systems that protected thousands of people across hundreds of miles. Perhaps most impressively, Native American communities had developed contingency plans that accounted for different tornado scenarios. They knew how to respond when storms approached from various directions, understood which shelter locations worked best for different types of tornado activity, and had backup plans when primary evacuation routes became blocked or dangerous. The final component of Native American tornado survival transcended physical preparation and tactical response, entering the realm of spiritual practice and psychological resilience that enabled entire communities to maintain their composure during nature's most terrifying displays of power. This wasn't superstition or primitive thinking, but sophisticated understanding of how human psychology and community cohesion could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe when facing uncontrollable natural forces. Tribal, spiritual leaders played crucial roles during tornado seasons, conducting ceremonies that served multiple practical purposes, while addressing the deep human need to find meaning in chaotic events. These rituals weren't just about appeasing storm gods or seeking supernatural protection, but about maintaining mental clarity, social unity, and emotional stability when entire communities faced potentially life-threatening situations. The ceremonies also served as intensive training exercises, where tribal members rehearsed their emergency responses while in heightened psychological states that simulated actual storm conditions. Through drumming, chanting, and ritualized movements, participants practiced the precise actions they would need to execute during real tornado threats. This preparation was invaluable, as panic and confusion during actual emergencies could easily lead to fatal mistakes in judgment or coordination. Many tribes developed specific protocols for children during tornado threats, recognizing that young people needed special psychological support to prevent terror from overwhelming their ability to follow safety instructions. Elders would tell stories during storms, creating narrative frameworks that helped children understand tornadoes as part of natural cycles rather than random acts of destruction. These stories also contained practical survival information disguised as entertainment, teaching children about wind patterns, safe locations, and appropriate responses to different atmospheric conditions. The spiritual dimension of tornado survival also included sophisticated concepts about timing and patience. Native American communities understood that the period immediately after a tornado passed could be just as dangerous as the storm itself. Debris fields, unstable structures, and the possibility of additional storm cells required continued caution long after the immediate threat had moved on. Spiritual practices helped community members maintain this vigilance without becoming paralyzed by ongoing anxiety. Recovery and renewal ceremonies marked the end of tornado seasons, serving both to celebrate survival and to process the psychological trauma that inevitably accompanied close encounters with such powerful natural forces. These gatherings reinforced community bonds, honored those who had provided leadership during dangerous periods, and began the process of preparing for the following year's storm season. The integration of physical, tactical, and spiritual approaches created a comprehensive survival system that enabled Native American communities to not merely endure tornado threats, but to thrive in regions where these storms occurred regularly. Their success wasn't based on conquering or controlling natural forces, but on developing such intimate knowledge of atmospheric patterns and community response capabilities that they could coexist with even the most violent weather phenomena. Their legacy offers profound lessons for modern communities still struggling to balance technological advancement with the timeless human need to live in harmony with natural forces that remain beyond our control. The wisdom they developed through centuries of careful observation and community cooperation continues to inform our understanding of how human societies can adapt to environmental challenges while maintaining their cultural identity and social cohesion. Through reading the language of the sky, perfecting the art of strategic disappearance, and maintaining spiritual practices that supported both individual and community resilience, Native Americans created one of history's most successful examples of long-term survival in the face of recurring natural disasters. Their story reminds us that the most effective responses to environmental challenges often combine scientific observation, practical preparation, and community unity in ways that honor both human ingenuity and natural power.